Guys, welcome back to another video. Hope you all are having a great day. And with no further ado, let's get into the week 18, the regular season finale recap, which is crazy that we're going to be starting the playoffs this Saturday. But let's talk about the game, starting with this past Saturday, starting off with the NFC South, considered NFC South championship, even though Tampa needed the Saints to win. And it was a poorly officiated game. I mean, the Panthers maybe didn't play the best game, but there was some horrible calls that really helped the Bucks win this game. Um, and Tampa, there's still no word on whether Todd Bowles will be back. He really needs to be fired because this team fell apart at the end of the year. I mean, they went from a Super Bowl contender at the beginning of the year with one of the best offenses and the defense playing really good to a team that their final two wins were against the Cardinals, who finished with the number three overall pick, and the Panthers in a poorly officiated game where it was rainy and like their two final wins just were not against the greatest teams, and they still didn't even make the playoffs despite being the most talented team in this division. And I think it just goes to show you that there needs to be big changes. The Bucks need to change some things up because this team just is not going to be contending in the NFC if they just continue to play like this. For the Panthers, I mean, there was some bad calls. There's even a moment after they did the flea flicker to Rico Dowdle where Bryce Young's like, why did he mouths? Why did we call that play? Not sure if he actually said it, but Carolina, this was a winning game. This was a potential shot where it's like Carolina, you win this game, you maybe set yourselves up to at least be competitive with whoever they played from the NFC West. Instead, you lose, and then you needed help on Sunday, which they got. But this is an overachieving year for the Panthers. But I hope next season they're more complete. Like I hope that they're like closer to like winning more back to backs and not like losing every other game because this team needs to start to be more consistent if they want to truly contend. And then moving on to the second game of the doubleheader on Saturday, Seahawks at Niners. And like I said, Seattle was going to dominate on defense against the Niners. Like San Fran had not played a defense like this. It's probably the Browns defense, and Cleveland does not have a very good offense. The score makes it seem like it was a little bit closer, but Seattle dominated this game. I mean, if it wasn't for Mike McDonald continuously going for it on fourth down and not taking points, this game would have been an even bigger blowout, and San Fran never would have had a chance to win this game. But for the first time since 2014, Seattle is the number one seed, and hey, I mean, with how good this defense is and with how well this offense has played throughout the season, don't be surprised if the Seahawks make a Super Bowl one with how good this team is. For San Fran, I mean, I think at best they win one playoff game. Like I've been saying for weeks, like this Niners team has overachieved with how badly injured they've been. Like San Fran just had really easy scheduling down the stretch, which has allowed them to win a lot of these games. But like outside of maybe beating the Eagles, which I do think is a possibility with how bad Philly's been playing down the stretch, but I think outside of one win, this team is not going far. And depending on what happens if Robert Saleh takes a head coaching job, the Niners are going to need some better luck next year. Because if it wasn't for the coaching staff being so good, this Niners team would not be where they are. And, we'll see what the Niners are healthier, but we'll just have to see if this team makes the right decisions to hopefully turn the Niners into a true contender and not just a team that can maybe win one playoff game and that's it. Moving on to the Sunday, starting with the 1 o'clock games, Saints at the Falcons. And, Atlanta did fire Raheem Morrison, Terry Fondo, which was the right decision. Like, yes, Atlanta finished on a 4 game winning streak and they finally, they won 5 of their final 6 games, with that one loss being to the Bad Jets. Just because a team goes on a winning streak down the stretch does not mean you need to keep the coach and GM. You see that all the time in sports where like a team at the end of the season will play well, and the owner will be like, "Hey, maybe this team just needs to, be more healthier or bring in better players." No, the Falcons did the right decision, and hopefully they bring in the correct coach that can finally help this team because this team is talented. We'll see what they do with the quarterback situation with Michael Penix possibly going to miss um, some parts of next year after tearing his ACL for the 4th time in his career. Or the 5th time. I know it's his fifth leg injury in what 8 years in his college and pro combined. So yeah, for the Saints, I mean, look, despite no Chris Olave and Alvin Kamara, this offense still played really well, and Tyler Shuck has a bright future. He's going to be the guy for New Orleans. We'll see what happens with Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, some of these veteran guys on the Saints team, but New Orleans is heading in the right direction finally post Drew Brees, and hopefully this team can continue to build for the future because they have some cornerstones, Shock, Banks, Olave, and if they sorry, and if they continue to build this roster with those guys, this Saints team in a wide open NFC South can truly get things done. Went on to the Browns at the Bengals. The battle for Ohio and Cleveland this time, unlike week one, gets the job done at the end. Shout out Myles Garrett breaking the sack record. And I know everybody's going to say, oh, we played an extra game. Well, if you actually look at how many snaps it took each player to take, it took Myles Garrett the least amount of snaps. It took TJ Watt, who played only 15 games, the most amount of snaps, to get to tie the record. I think that goes to show you that Myles Garrett didn't need to, you know, he didn't need to be like Watt or Strahan play a lot of snaps. He was just playing really well, and you know, like you can't say that the record doesn't mean anything when he got 23 sacks in 17 games, but I think only like 400 and some snaps. Meanwhile, Watt and Strahan needed like over 500 and 600 snaps to get it. But moving on to talk about the game, Shador, I mean, looked really well. It was reported earlier that Kevin Stefanski has been fired, which I don't know if it was the right decision just because the team did play well down the stretch. Um, and he's going to be an option for other teams. But Cleveland has a young, talented roster. And I'm glad they kept Andrew Berry as the GM because if he builds off this 2025 class, which was one of his best, if Shador works out, which I think he should be given the starting job next year. At least he should have the ability to fight for it in training camp because, he won 3 of his 7 starts. He didn't have the greatest stat line, but he played well enough to at least be given an opportunity to say, hey, you could be the guy. Um, but if Andrew Berry continues to stack good draft classes along with making good decisions in free agency, because it wasn't his decision to trade for Deshaun Watson. Yes, he's the GM that made the move, but It was more so the owner Jimmy Haslam wanting to do that, not really Andrew Barry. And I think if Barry's able to build the roster his way, and maybe if Shador works out, or maybe if they get the future quarterback, this Browns team could be for real with how talented they are. For the Bengals, look, I've been saying it for weeks. Zach Taylor needs to be moved off. I think the Bengals, kind of like another team we'll talk about later in the same division, when you have a talented quarterback and a talented offense, I feel like you need to bring in a defensive minded coach. Like look at what the Texans are. A defensive minded coach. Like the offense isn't great, but D'Amico Ryans has built that Houston defense to where they have a chance to win the entire thing. And I feel like the Bengals need to realize one, Zach Taylor is never going to be the guy. He was carried by Burrow to that Super Bowl. And two, you need to bring in a defensive guy who can bring in his philosophy, whether it's like a Flores, a Sala, Jesse Minter, Chris Shula, like one of those elite minds on the defensive side who can make the Bengals defense better and then can rely on Burrow, Chase, and Higgins and Gesicki, Chase Brown, and that offense to play well. The Bengals can be a contender. They just need to fire Zach Taylor, which hopefully will be done, and the Bengals can actually bring in the right coach to get this team to being a contender. Put on to the Colts at the Texans. And hey, Houston, they're going to be the 5 seed. They probably, honestly, might have the easiest path because they played the Steelers, who are not menacing at all. Like, Pittsburgh is not a menacing team at all. Like, Houston will dominate them um, next Monday. Um, and then depending on what happens on those other two matchups, if they take on like the Broncos or they take on like maybe the Patriots, like I feel like Houston has a real shot where it's like with how good that defense is, they make any QB look horrible. And if that offense plays decent enough, like we've seen recently, I think they're a Super Bowl contender. And to go from 0-3 to 12-5 and almost win your division, that goes to show you that the Texans truly are a team that, you know, prior to D'Amico Ryans and CJ Stroud coming in, were one of the worst. Like they were a laughing stock. Now they turned into a perennial contender for hopefully the next maybe decade. And it goes to show you that the right moves and the right coach can really set a team up. For the Colts, Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen are coming back, which I thought was an interesting decision just because more so Ballard, because he's been there since like 2017, I want to say. So he's been there for a while, but I mean, this team was 8-2 at one point. They lost their final 7 games to finish 8-9. I know injuries played a big part in that, but I thought it was interesting to keep both guys. Compared to Riley Leonard, a 6th-round pick, not much expectations on him, and he played well against a elite Texans defense. You know, Alec Pierce, I didn't think that really should have been called. Like he accidentally touched the ref, but anyway, the Colts. I don't know if they have a future with Riley Leonard because it was just one game, but maybe give him a shot. I mean, especially if Daniel Jones is going to miss time next year, you don't really know the future of your quarterback situation. Maybe give Riley Leonard a shot to possibly earn it next year. And wouldn't that be a surprise if the Colts thought they had their guy Daniel Jones, he gets injured, and then they get their guy in Riley Leonard, who was seen as just a third string guy in there. But on to the Titans at the Jag, and I mean, look, Jacksonville turnaround is crazy. I mean, last year this team was 4-13. Felt like this team was never going to be a true contender. And a year later, 13-4, you flip the script, 9+ wins, and I mean Jacksonville's a shot to make it all the way to the Super Bowl. How good their defense is, which it's always been talented. It's just they've needed a good defensive coordinator to fulfill it. And then the offense has started to play better. You know that they don't have elite playmakers like Brian Thomas Jr. is supposed to be a guy, but hasn't really been that this year. T. Law's been able to play well. Travis Etienne is playing some of the best footballs of his career. And Liam Cohen and James Gladstone need to be considered one of the best coach GM duos to come in and bring in, rebuild a team, because it goes to show you that the right decisions, the right people in charge can have a team that's usually one of the worst teams in the league become a true contender, and they should have a scary future for the rest of the league. Tennessee, I mean, Cam Ward gets injured, so it was kind of hard for this team to really compete, but it's on to 2026. You hope Mike Borgonzi makes the right decisions for head coach, for the weapons around Ward, and hopefully this team maybe, kind of like Caleb Williams, Drake May this year, maybe Cam Ward can be that guy next year where the Titans make that leap to being a possible, like a playoff contender, maybe. Um, because if you put the right head coach next to Ward, you bring in the right talent to support him, this Titans team can be a contender. And really, you know, it's crazy because I remember a couple of years ago, people were saying how the AFC South had one of the younger QB duos with like Stroud, Lawrence, Levis, and Anthony Richardson. Well, Levis didn't work out, and Richardson hasn't worked out, but it maybe Tennessee finally has found the guy for the future, and the right people in charge can hopefully have this Tennessee team in contention for years to come. Moving on to Packers at the Vikings. It's crazy that Minnesota, if they had just better QB play early on in the season, would have been a playoff team, because this team at the end of the stretch showed that if they had better QB play, they would have been a serious contender. Now, Jason McCarthy should at least be given the opportunity to prove to be the long-term guy, but the Vikings need to bring in other people. They need to bring in a veteran like the Colts did with Daniel Jones. Really bring in a veteran who could compete with McCarthy, because yes, he played well down the stretch. He so far in his NFL career has been injury prone. I don't know, you know, if that'll be a long term factor, but he's been pretty injured the first 2 years of his NFL career, and I think the Vikings owe it to the team and to the fans to bring in somebody else who can compete with McCarthy, because this team, talent wise, is one of the best. But we'll just have to see. For the Packers, another collapse at the end of the year. This team was once upon a time 9-3-1, first place in the NFC North, and were competing to get that number one seed. They lose four straight. Gonna play the Bears in the wild card round, which is crazy, but most likely are going to be knocked out of the playoffs. There's speculation Matt LaFleur could be fired. I think it's crazy. With the way the team has finished the last couple of years, maybe it isn't. Because I remember 2 years ago, Green Bay stunned the Cowboys and everything was crazy. I remember, you know, I remember, people were crowning Jordan Love saying oh, the Packers are going to be a for real contender for years to come. And then last year, I know he was banged up, but this team fell below expectations. And then this year, they seem to be better, but then they fall apart at the end. And I think maybe it is time to consider LaFleur, Love, and this whole team because and look, I know injuries plagued them down the stretch and really hurt them, but either way, the Packers seem to always fall apart at the end, and it is a major concern for a team that one says they're a Super Bowl contender, but doesn't really feel like it. We're up to the Cowboys at the Giants, and look, I know people are gonna be like, "Oh, why would the Giants win back-to-back games when they had a chance to be the have the number one pick?" It's because these players are trying to play for their jobs. Like this isn't the NBA where there's fully guaranteed contracts or the MLB or NHL. Like this isn't where players are going to sit out or players are going to not play well so the team can get a top draft pick. No, these guys are playing for their jobs. They're playing for having you know playing for next season, coaching for next season, and like I get fans are gonna want the number one pick, but I mean that's what's great about the NFL is you'll never see a team blatantly trying to lose games down the stretch. You'll always see teams competing down the stretch and pulling off, what are considered upsets just because of the fact that these teams are trying to play for next season. Like they're not trying to get help out the team. They're trying to play for their jobs. And like Jackson Dart, hopefully will be the franchise guy. He's played like it the past couple of games. Hopefully they nail the coach right. And this Giants team has a future that looks bright. They just need the right people in charge. It seems like they're for some reason keeping GM Joe Shane, which I think is another bad decision. Time will tell whether the Giants will be better. For Dallas, like it's been a rough year, but I think it shows that those defensive changes, more so letting Michael, trading Michael Parsons away, have come back to hurt this team because this team, their offense, one of the best. And I know most of the starters didn't play in the second half, but still, the um the team's offense is really good, and I think Dallas really needs to invest in the defense this year for this offseason because this was a year where the NFC East was open for grabs. Up for grabs. Like Philly was not playing their best ball at the end of the year, and Dallas still had a shot to win the division, but because of their defense, they just couldn't. And we'll see what happens with George Pickens, Javonte Williams, who are going to be huge free agents for this team. But the Cowboys, I think, need to realize that this team needs to have a good enough defense. Firing Matt Eberflus could start with that, and bringing in guys, whether it's free agency, the draft, to really help this team out. Moving on to the 4 o'clock slate, late window Bills hosting the Jets, and I mean the Bills took care of business. Josh Allen kept his starting streak alive. Um, they moved up to the 6th seed with the Chargers losing, so they play a better matchup with the Jags. Although they did beat New England, so maybe it would have been better. But you get the win against the Jets. What more can you say? For New York, it might be the end of Aaron Glenn, which, I'm not a big fan of firing guys after 1 year, but if the guy is clearly losing the locker room, if the guy clearly has lost this team, I think you do consider it. Like Gerard Mayo last year, fired because the team just was not playing great, and he also was, throwing guys under the bus. And I think maybe the Jets need to consider moving off from Glenn, at least because this team has potential if they hit on those picks and they develop those guys correctly. But I don't think Aaron Glenn's the guy. Moving on to the Lions at the Bears, and this was a good one for Detroit. You sweep the Bears for the second consecutive season. Um, and I mean, it's got to feel good entering the offseason with a win. You don't want to end on a 3-game losing streak, knowing how talented this team is. And hey, they get the win at the end of the year. They really just put some positive vibes into the offseason where you can say, hey, we need to make some changes to this team to get back to contending. At least we ended on a high note and we at least will be competitive. For the Bears, I mean, thank God the Commanders beat the Eagles because if not, they would have been playing the Niners again in the wild card round. But I mean, it's hard. You lose your final 2 games when it felt like everything was clicking. But hey, you're in the playoffs for the first time since the 2020 COVID year, which they really only got there because the Cardinals fell apart at the end of the year. Um, and maybe you go on a run, maybe you win a playoff game or two, and give this team a sense that they can be contenders if they continue to build up this team because of how talented they are. The Bears, I feel like, can win a couple playoff games. Not saying win the Super Bowl, but they could win a couple playoff games and be in contention for years to come. But on to the Chargers at the Broncos. Denver locked up the number 1 seed. It kind of wasn't that hard when LA's playing their backups, though. The game was close early on, but LA just really had no resistance. And for the first time since Denver last won the Super Bowl in the 2015 season, the Broncos are the number 1 seed. The AFC goes through Mile High, and it's kind of feel nice for the Broncos, because you think about a couple of years ago, they were getting beat 70-20, and everybody was laughing at them. Who's laughing now? The Broncos are the number 1 seed. This team controls their path to the Super Bowl, and you just got to win 2 games, and you're Super Bowl bound. We'll see if they can do it, but this is a team that is a contender, and yeah, for the Chargers, when they fall to the 7 seed, which isn't ideal, but you needed to rest those starters. Justin Herbert, Derwin James. Some of the guys who are going to be long-term pieces under Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz. So you got to protect those guys from a meaningless game. You have nothing to play for. Some people are going to be like, "Oh, it's not a meaningless game." I'm not saying like it's meaningless, like they don't want to win. It's just like they didn't have anything to play for. Um, but I mean, I could see the Chargers pulling off the upset against the Pats. I mean, New England's looked vulnerable at times, and a Chargers team that could give New England's offense, make them uncomfortable. And if Herbert's able to be like 70-80%, I think that Chargers team could make it uncomfortably close late into that game and possibly pull off the upset. Moving on to the Cardinals at the Rams, and I mean, LA was actually losing at one point. It was a close game early on, but the Rams took care of business with a 5 seed. They'll play the Panthers. Um, this was a good win for the Rams. They kind of, yeah, it was a good win for the Rams because, the last couple of games you lose them, especially to the Falcons, and it kind of put a sour taste in your mouth saying, are the Rams for real? But you get the win here. You got some help from Seattle to um move up to the 5 seed. And look, the Rams still can make a Super Bowl run. Like, it's not impossible because you get Devontae Adams back. This defense does have some question marks, especially when they were giving up huge plays to the Cardinals. But if they can tighten up and this Rams offense, which is extremely talented, can continue to play well, I see the Rams team that should be a Super Bowl contender and can win it this year. For the Cardinals, it was a good attempt. They made the game competitive and at least kept it going. I don't know why Jonathan Kennedy hasn't been fired. I mean, no team surprisingly goes from 2-0 to 3-14, losing 14 of their final 15 games. No team does that. And this team needs a reset. They're going to move on from Kyler Murray. They need to move on from Jonathan Gannon. And this is hopefully the final game he coaches because if they bring him back, it'll be just crazy that the team kept him another season when they could have brought in somebody better to really help out this team. But on to the Chiefs at the Raiders. It's a battle of actually former teammates Chris Aludikin and Kenny Pickett. Both were part of the Steelers in 2022. But I mean, the Raiders won in a not so good game, but the Pete Carroll era at least ends on a good note. They obviously kept the number one pick because apparently the Giants were the only team that could have gotten it, which didn't make any sense because like if the Raiders lost to the Giants, why would then if they finished with the same record, why would the Giants go ahead of them? But that's for other people to figure out. But you finish out the year with a win. It's a possibility they could trade Max Crosby, but if you're the Raiders, you just hope you can bring in the right coach, bring in the right coordinators, and hopefully bring in the right um, players through the draft and free agency to really help this team out because Patrick Mahomes tore his ACL, which means not that there's a wide open window, but like the Raiders, if they made the right moves, could be better next year and could be fighting for a playoff spot if they make the right moves. For the Chiefs, big changes are going to be happening. Um, we'll see what they do with the quarterback situation with Mahomes. At least missing some of the beginning of the season, but I mean, if you're the Chiefs, you just hope to push this season to the side and hopefully move to 2026 knowing, hey, we were injury plagued and just we're not that great, but we we bring the right people in and this team can be back to winning Super Bowls, which nobody in the NFL wants, but it'll most likely happen. Dolphins at the Patriots. It was actually close early. Like Miami was keeping it competitive, but then New England just ran away with it. The Pats, the 2 seed, just like Denver, they are a for real contender. Even though they don't have a lot of playoff experience, they have it with their head coach, and this team has played really well, despite so many people saying, "Oh, they have the easiest schedule in the league." It doesn't matter. You play who you're like in the NFL. The schedule is based off of how the teams finished the prior year. So unlike in college where you choose who you play, um, or in other leagues where you play everybody, it's like you only play the teams you play. So New England played who they were supposed to play this year, and you can't take that away from them. Drake May possibly the MVP, but this team can win the Super Bowl, and we'll see if they do. For the Dolphins, just the ending of a year that really was not that great. And I mean, you hope. Mike McDaniel seems like he'll be back. You hope the next GM that's brought in can really build this team from the ground up because outside of like Achan, Waddle, and maybe a couple other guys, this team doesn't have much to look forward to, and you hope that the Dolphins can truly, um, hopefully, can truly rebuild this team to hopefully be back in playoff contention because it was just a couple of seasons ago where this team, was AFC East leaders. That it felt like they were going to be a top two seed, but they fell apart, and now they need to rebuild a team to hopefully get back there. Went on to the Commanders at the Eagles, and look, if you're Washington, you got to take this into the offseason with some momentum. A rough year, with injuries and everything, but hey, you got the win and you finish out strong. You beat a division rival, which is always good. And Josh Johnson played well. Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, or JC Merritt, and I call him, had a good game. The defense made plays. And, if you're Dan Quinn and Adam Peters, you just got to hopefully make the right moves in free agency. Hope to have a healthier year next year. And, they can be back because in NFC East, where it's not really that hard to win it because of how bad the rest of the teams are. If Washington's healthier, they make the right moves in the offseason, this team can win it next year just because the division is not that hard to win. I mean, the Eagles barely won it because everybody else was either bad, banged up, or traded away their best players in the Cowboys' sake and then try to recover at the trade deadline, but it's never going to work. For Philly, you hope to enter the playoffs on a four-game winning streak and bring some momentum with them. They possibly can win a playoff game because they're playing the Niners in Lincoln Financial, but outside of that, I don't see the Eagles doing much. And this is a Philly team that I don't really see how this team moves forward because there's big changes that might be needed on the coaching staff with the players, and I think this is a huge off season for the Eagles to hopefully get these decisions right because it feels like every year they're good. The coordinators get snatched and they just never recover. And that falls on the head coach for not choosing the right guys. And I think it really needs to be emphasized that maybe Nick Sirianni isn't the long term guy. And maybe Jalen Hurts isn't either. Moving on to the final game of the regular season, Sunday Night Football, Ravens Steelers. Um, this was a crazy game. I mean, it was a slugfest early on, but then it was back and forth. Um, Still can't believe Chris Boswell missed that extra point. Like he has been perfect for it seems like forever, and then he misses that extra point, giving the Ravens the opportunity. Hylute misses a kick, but I mean, I feel like a lot of people are going to blame him for the loss, but I mean, this defense was not playing the great. Like this defense, and like I know Kyle Hamilton went out and they had other guys get banged up, but this defense had the Steelers at 3rd and 10 and Pittsburgh had no timeouts. If you get two stops, you win the game. Instead, Awuzie trips and leaves Calvin Austin wide open for the game-winning touchdown. Look, Lamar did whatever he could. I know he didn't play the greatest early on, but when the Ravens needed him to make plays, he made those plays. I know everybody's going to blame him for this loss or say, oh, this is why the Ravens need to move on from him. No. The Ravens need to move on from John Harbaugh. They need to bring in a better coach because, and I'm honestly kind of glad the Ravens did lose this game because maybe it's a wake up call that you can't keep on doing the same thing. Because it felt like if the Ravens made the playoffs, even if they got destroyed by whoever they played in the first round, the owner Steve Bisciotti was just going to be like, "Hey, we made the playoffs. Let's continue to do the same." But I think they need to make drastic changes. They need to because you can't keep on doing the same thing over and over again. They've had Harbaugh and Lamar for 8 seasons now, and outside of one AFC Championship game appearance, they haven't done much outside of that. And Harbaugh needs to be fired, and I think the Ravens need to move on from him. And the Ravens are not trading Lamar. Okay, Harbaugh needs to be gone, and this Ravens team maybe finally can bring in a coach who will elevate this team because for it feels like years the Ravens have always played down to competition. It always feels like the Ravens have just been the better team, but they always play down to certain teams for some reason, especially the Steelers. Like the last couple of years, the Ravens have had the better team, the better talent roster, but it always seems like the Steelers know how to beat the Ravens because the Ravens seem to always play the same. And I feel like a changing it up with the coach, maybe even the GM, can really turn this team into a true contender where it's like, hey, they can win it all and not be a team that everybody knows is going to lose in the second round of the championship game. But that'll do it for today's video. Hope you guys hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow for my mock draft 2.0 now that the regular season is over. And I'll catch you guys on Friday for my playoff predictions. And I'll be doing weekly recaps for these playoff games. So hope you guys stay tuned. And I'll see you then. Bye.